Boys and Girls Club and YMCA of Greater Birmingham on the planning processes related to restructuring the community schools program.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion?
I have a question. So, are we saying restructuring of the community school program or entering into a contract? I mean, those are two different things, are they not?
This is my recommendation to allow me as the superintendent to work closely with the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Birmingham as well as the YMCA on the restructuring of the community schools program. This is not a formal agreement because we have not been able to get to that point yet. Part of the restructuring will be to look more in depth at our programs and see how both of those organizations can best support us. This is to allow me to move forward with the planning processes.
Is there any more discussion? Ms. Williams?
Yeah, I do. The reason I asked is because I understand it to be the contract negotiations for the two. They just seem to be two. Doing the contract negotiations with those two agencies and restructuring community schools as we now know it, those two agencies is just a part of that picture. So how do we get to the full restructuring of community school program?
April, I totally hear what you're saying, but in the recommendation, it's talking about the planning processes. We don't have that full yet. It's to start that process.
But you're asking me to restructuring of community schools program. You didn't ask me, okay.
Ms. Brown?
I think the wording here is what April is questioning, and you all know, I've had so many questions on this, most of you all are sick of me. Restructuring means you are putting something back together in a different way. Okay. To me, it would be the planning of a new community school program would have fit better instead of saying restructuring, because those are two different meanings. And right now, I don't know about you all, but some of the board members are still getting calls dealing with the community schools. Some are here negative. Some are saying that the parents and so forth are being left out. And I know Dr. G is tired of this. But we were elected by the public. We are representing the public. And we are supposed to be open to hear what the public has to say. And there are a lot of people that they're not understanding actually what is going on. And that's all some of the people are asking for is an explanation, explaining to them exactly what is going on. And if you look at this, restructuring means that the board is restructuring the community school. And that is not what we have been discussing. So we all need an answer. Dr. G.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Let me just remind the audience that when I came on board in June of this year, I was informed that the city was not going to fund community schools. And the reason for that is that there was an absence of accountability and robust programming. I was not in a position because I did not have the background in terms of knowing about community schools. And so I asked for a little bit more time to learn as much as I could. And in those few weeks, from my initial start here at Birmingham, I spent time talking to the coordinators and others throughout the district who could give me a little bit more information about community schools. I also met with Mayor Bell, and I also just spoke with district leaders. And you may recall, before school started, there was a press conference at the city. And during that press conference, I communicated that I just needed a little bit more time, that I didn't feel that it was in our best interest, having learned that community schools have been in the district, in this community for over 40 years. I did not feel that it was a matter of eliminating the program, but I did feel that it was important for us to restructure it, because there was not consistency throughout our district with regards to how we operated community schools. And I did not see at that juncture that it would be in our best interest to not carry on with community schools, especially with schools starting just a couple of weeks away. Our students needed to know where they were going to go after schools, and our parents needed to know what support they would have for after-school care. But because there was such an absence, and quite frankly there still is an absence of accountability with regards to student achievement, with regards to robust programming, I felt at that time, and I still do, that the program needs to be restructured so that students can also have their academic enrichment outside of the regular school day, as well as enrichment opportunities where they can learn other activities that are going to help meet the needs of the whole child. We have to focus on the needs of the student. I mean, that's what this restructuring is all about. I understand that there's some concern because people don't know exactly what the restructuring will look like. And quite frankly, I'm not in a position to tell you that this evening, because that would have been putting the cart before the horse. We have to do our due diligence first. What I wanted to do was reach out to community partners for assistance to see who could help us. What better two organizations could help us, quite frankly? I think we would all agree that we would want our own children to be a part of a Boys and Girls Club that's been around more than 50 years, as well as Boys and Girls Club, as well as an organization, and the YMCA that's been around for over 100 years. These organizations have a reputation for doing outstanding work for children and families throughout the country and beyond. They have a curriculum, each of them separately have a curriculum, an academic component by which we will be able to measure academic achievement, not just at the end of the year, but throughout the year. They have dedicated time where our students would be participating in core content areas outside of school in a way that would still keep the students engaged. Furthermore, they have opportunities for students to have the ability to take part in enrichment activities while at their own school or in a school very close by to them, just depending on the number of participants at the individual schools. So we would not have been in a position to start the planning in any way without me first doing a presentation to my board, which happened during the September the 22nd work session, where I rolled out a tentative plan where we would restructure it. Now we have, for example, 3 coordinators. I think we only need 1 district coordinator. And we would have 4 liaisons that would support, on a part-time basis, that would support the overall programming at the zones. And they would work in very close partnership with the 2 individual organizations. Both organizations would be responsible for the work in 2 separate zones. So of the 4 zones, we would have 2 of those, 2 zones would be working very closely with the Boys and Girls Club, and the other 2 zones would be working very closely with the YMCA. We don't have all the answers. The point is that the board would allow me to begin the planning with the organization so that we can come back and say, this is our plan, that we can go out into the communities and explain what would be available for our children and have those two organizations be a part of that conversation so that they can answer questions specifically about their work as well. But more importantly, for us to work as partners and for us to be able to leverage that partnership, to be able to qualify for larger grants by which more of our children will be able to participate in quality after-school programming. Right now, we don't have that, quite frankly. This is a model that I am sure other school districts would probably replicate, because how often can you say that you have an after-school program with two organizations that are in your community that have proven results? And that is what we're trying to speak to. And I think it's important also to mention that one of the reasons why funding was jeopardized is because all of the funding went towards salary and benefits. All of the funding from the city went towards salary and benefits. We have to make sure that we keep our children as a focus of our work. And the restructuring plan will allow us to be able to have more money that will go towards our children and actually enhancing their enrichment opportunities. I don't know any other way to do it but to be transparent and to just tell you what we have and tell you that our children deserve the best. If you ask me where we are at this point, this is where we are. We don't have the full plan. We are going to stand, when I say we're, I'm talking about both organizations. We're going to stand together. It is my hope that we would stand together collectively and say, as a school district, as two partnering organizations, we're going to do our very best to have the very best quality after-school program that all of our children in Birmingham City Schools deserve. They deserve it. And so there will be a rollout plan. Obviously, these organizations would not be able to do everything in tandem like we would want. It is our desire to begin in January with this rollout plan. We might have to start small and build up to that, I'm not sure. But the opportunity for our students, starting from the elementary through secondary levels, to have participation in quality programming, I think it's very difficult to argue with that. I really do.
Board members, we have a motion on the floor. All those, Ms. Hendricks?
There are a couple of issues. This being an agenda item with no supporting documentation to give us any assurance of how this is going to roll out is a little bit putting the cart before the horse to some extent. Because we did have the work session, and the only numbers that were given to us as it relates to this possible partnership, because we don't have an operating agreement, so the information that was given to us was only based on the salaries. We don't know how much it's gonna cost on our end. We don't know how long it's gonna take in terms of the implementation to get it in a small group or a big group, or how we're gonna roll that out. We don't know the capacity and how many children that the Y or the Boys and Girls Club can serve. And when they spoke to us, they said just that they don't know yet what it looks like. They don't know what the cost associated would be. They did not guarantee that there were federal grants that they already had to marry these together. So we're looking at voting on the possibility in October with a rollout in January, and none of these questions can be answered today.
They can't be answered, Ms. Hendricks, because it would have been presumptuous for us to have, the only way the organizations can really start to assess where we are is to start going into our schools, to start really working with and seeing to what extent, where they have certain standards as well. So they have to make sure if they're going to operate in our schools, they have to make sure that we have certain areas in our schools that they would be able to operate from. We would not have been able to allow them to do their assessment without me first coming to the board and say, this is what I'm looking at in terms of having our after-school program be a part of the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. So we are not going to have an agreement. We will come back with an agreement and we will roll out a plan not just to the board but to the entire community. We weren't in a position to do any of that without first saying, without quite frankly having the approval of the board that yes, the idea of partnering with these two high-quality organizations, yes, let's go forward and allow the planning processes to see exactly what that will look like. That is really where we are right now. We don't have a well-thought-out plan because that is the next step. It's my hope that with your approval tonight, we will now be able to move forward with really looking in depth at how we can best move forward. That is really the next step.
Over, we have a,
Mr. President, I have one question.
yes, sir.
Okay, so this is we're voting on right here is to basically give permission to proceed with looking at these two organizations. Am I in the ballpark with that? All right, secondly, if this is not an option for us, what will community schools be? Will we continue on as we have been?
I wanna take a stab at that, because we all, every single one of us, engaged the mayor and council, where the mayor was adamant, extremely adamant
That was my next
about taking funding away. Okay, he zeroed it out in his budget, recommendation to the city council, because of accountability piece. He didn't want to do it, and because of community and political pressure, excuse me, public, this is a public meeting, could you all at least talk low enough where we can't hear you on the dais? The accountability measures the mayor wanted was that he wanted accountability measures in exchange for giving us the money. 100% of this funding didn't go towards the programmatic piece that we all want to continue, which is what we were begging for. The money went towards employees and salaries, so the accountability piece touched on the programmatic, the personnel, and the funding of it. My concern is if we don't at least allow this process to start, we can't, it's gonna be hard to go back to a mayor who has been trying to zero this out every year because of no accountability measures in place. 100% of the funding for community schools since its existence has come from the city of Birmingham, and the mayor and council have agreed if this is going to continue, please show us the accountability piece. That's just my response to your question, because I feel like we have to do something. It can't continue as is. That's on us. Particularly if we want to fund it. We were all a part of that conversation. We all shared the same frustration. Yes, ma'am.
A couple of things. The first one is 100% of the funding did not come from the city of Birmingham. But they did provide funding for our administrative costs. That's not the matter that I take issue with today. We did have a work session with A.G. Gaston Boys and Girls Club and the Y presented, and they said to us, as my peer stated, they didn't really know. They didn't know how many they could handle. They weren't really sure. I'm not opposed to continuing to explore those opportunities. That's not what this says. This states restructuring of the community schools program. Now, if you are asking me for approval to continual exploration and negotiations with those two entities, I have no opposition to that. But this issue says restructuring of community schools program, which is a much more comprehensive package. And I don't think that there is anything that prohibits the superintendent from continuing to work on that plan and bringing it to the board to approve at the time that she's ready to make a recommendation. We don't need an action from the board for her to do that.
Restructure, y'all, that we all agreed to. Zero pushback from this board.
But we don't have restructuring. You're not asking me to approve a restructure. You're not saying to me, I want to do this, I want to do this. All you're asking me to do is to approve restructuring of community schools programs with no framework. And I'm saying to you, I am fully prepared to agree for the superintendent to continue exploring the contract possibilities with those two agents that's been presented to us. I don't have enough of information before me as a board member to agree to restructuring the community schools program.
There was a full presentation, board members, and just challenging us to.
And it was only on
Ms.
those
Williams,
two issues.
I have heard you very clearly. Please allow me to speak, and then I'm going to allow Mr. Watson to speak. We had a full presentation given to him. The presentation was a minimum of 6 pages. It was given by our chief of staff of our school system. Including in this restructure, it's touched on personnel and programmatic from a restructuring standpoint. So personnel from a restructuring standpoint, including reducing full-time people to 1 full-time person and 3 part-times, where there was zero pushback from this board, as well as the programmatic piece entertaining these 2 organizations. If that's not restructuring, I don't know what is, but maybe we were listening to 2 different things. Mr. Watson.
So, what I'm hearing is, I'm hearing the superintendent is bringing this to us to request to plan, to go to continue the planning process. What I'm hearing from board members is that she doesn't need to come to us to ask and request a plan, to go ahead and to figure out these details and bring it back to us for a vote. That's kind of what I'm hearing. So I just say we just challenge, we just go ahead and give her the amount of